After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA.
Brother, we just had an NBA player declare for the WNBA draft. Former third overall pick in the 2011 NBA draft, Enes Kanter, who had an 11-year NBA career, decided that he wanted to declare for the WNBA.
WNBA getting trolled very badly right now. Very badly right now, to the point where we have former NBA players, not just back end of the bench players, an actual starting caliber player in the NBA, a solid player off the bench. We have Enes Kanter declaring himself eligible for the WNBA draft. The WNBA Players Association, in their wisdom, they respond to getting trolled. Joke's really on them.
A 6'10", 250-pound former NBA center just declared himself eligible for the WNBA draft. And the wildest part? Nobody can actually explain why he's wrong.
Enes Kanter is declaring for the WNBA draft. Now, if you know who Enes Kanter is, well, he goes by Enes Kanter Freedom now. He's actually a former NBA player, right? So he used to play in the NBA, but now he's declaring to play in the WNBA. Now, he's had some controversial, statements and issues with the alphabet community and with, men playing women's sports. I believe it was just somebody, there's a man who's playing a women's sport over in Europe, and he's talking about trying to play in the WNBA. So I feel like Enes Kanter is mocking that community, or he may be mocking the WNBA. I'm not sure what he's doing. Now, he personally said, I'm not trying to mock or disrespect anybody, but you got to be doing that because we know you are not declaring for the WNBA draft. Like, come on, you're not doing that. You know what I mean? Obviously, they're not going to let him. He's not, transition or anything like that. He's still.
That's the mess the WNBA is sitting in right now, and it didn't happen by accident. It happened because the league spent months dodging one simple question, and a former NBA player just forced them to answer it in front of millions of people.
What's happening, folks? So a former NBA player just announced that they were going to be joining the WNBA in 2027, and he is 6'10", I might add. And I know the first thing I'm going to hear is that, wait, I thought you were against men and women's sports. Yes, I am. But the whole point is that WNBA apparently isn't, and some of you apparently are not either. And guess what? Sometimes you can't tell them. Sometimes you have.
Here's how we got here. Enes Kanter Freedom, the third overall pick back in 2011, a guy who spent over a decade grinding in the NBA, posted a video this week announcing he was officially declaring for the 2027 WNBA draft. Not the NBA draft, not some overseas league, the WNBA. And he said it with a completely straight face.
I've carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I am simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for. My team and I are prepared to ensure these guidelines are applied equally, consistently, and without exception. And I look forward to the WNBA honoring its stated principles. See you at training.
In the video, Kanter reads out what sounds like a press release. That's not a joke tweet. That's a full script, delivered like a man reading a legal filing. And that's exactly the point he was making.
Okay. This is the same guy that was dunking on guys like Serge Ibaka, former NBA MVP, and Joel Embiid. Dunking on guys like DeMarcus Cousins, blocking Russell Westbrook, bodying the three-time MVP and Nikola Jokic. I know Enes Kanter is all washed up now. I mean, we haven't seen him play in the NBA since the 2021-2022 season. He's now 34 years old. But this man would absolutely dominate in the WNBA. WNBA has yet to respond to this, but I'm pretty sure Enes Kanter's going to try to fight hard to try to play in the WNBA next season.
Because here's the thing, nobody in the league office wants to say out loud. Article 13, Section 1 of the WNBA's own collective bargaining agreement, the one signed back in March, states plainly, only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. 409 pages in that document, and not one of them defines what woman actually means for eligibility purposes. The words transgender and gender identity don't appear anywhere in the entire agreement. Not once.
By the way, there is a piece of the CBA that says only women are allowed to compete in the WNBA. Here's the problem. Outkick and Fox News reached out to the WNBA for clarification on what is a woman. They also reached out to the Players Union. What is a woman? Define it for us in terms of your CBA. The WNBA has refused to do so.
So when a reporter, a fan, or apparently a former NBA player asks the league to clarify its own rule, the answer they get back is silence. The WNBA has not responded to multiple requests to clarify how eligibility actually works. Not this week, not last week, not since this entire conversation started.
On that same vein, investor with ESPN, you talked about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Just can you expand your viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children. And that's little girls who are also involved in that category. And so I stand on what I said, and I'll always believe that. You know, I don't know. I'm not a very political person, but I do have beliefs. I have morals, and I'll always stand on those and be true to who I am. And I think people are going to take it how they want to take it, but I've never even really said anything about that. And so when it comes just to protecting young girls in sport and women in sport, I feel very strongly about that. I think that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. If Title IX and women's sports were protected, then you wouldn't hear about any type of women in sport. And so I think in the future, it's just really important to protect. Like I said, I extend love, and I don't dislike anyone. Like, I think there is room for absolutely everyone here, and I think there's room to love everyone. And I truly think when you get people in the same room, you have conversations, you actually have a lot in common with a lot of people. And so I'm there to love, but I'm also there to love biological women, and I think that there are rights that need to be protected. And like I said, I'm going to stand true to that. I'll never falter in my beliefs in that, but I have never once said I hated the trans community. Like I said, I think there's space for everyone.
Rewind a few weeks, and you'll see exactly where this pressure started building. Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham sat down for an ESPN feature and got asked directly about protecting women's sports. She didn't dance around it. I want to protect young girls in a locker room, or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men, she said. Simple sentence. No name calling, no attack on anybody specific. Just an opinion, stated plainly by someone who plays in the league every single night. And instead of the league quietly moving on, that one answer set off a chain reaction that's still going.
I don't think we should feel like our safe space is being threatened. I come from a space of inclusion, and the narrative that I think that is problematic is to suggest that, number one, that transgender athletes are the biggest problem in women's sports. There's a faction of people in our country that are making this a massive issue. We need to protect trans kids. Every kid. To me, it's a human's right.
Days later, Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve stood in front of reporters before a game against the Fever and pushed back hard, reiterating her support for trans athletes and saying every kid deserves a place to play. Her comments were treated as a thoughtful, welcome contribution to the conversation. Nobody suggested she was being political for having an opinion. Nobody questioned whether she should be speaking about it at all.
Gabby Williams. Advocating to allow a trans athlete on her team or against her team.
I think it's trans rights now is our new battle. That's what I think that I was saying, that like the battles have changed. You know, like our intentions are the same, but now that the environment has changed, we see trans people's rights being, stripped away from them. There's a lot of discourse around trans athletes and what they can compete in. I would welcome a trans athlete on my team or against my team anytime. I don't think it's a problem in the world. It's just another way to kind of attack trans people. We've seen players like Lasia Clarendon who stepped into that forefront and have been brave enough and courageous enough to kind of step up. So I guess that's the next battle.
Then came Chicago Sky star Gabby Williams, who went even further. There's a lot of discourse around trans athletes and what they can compete in, she said. I would welcome a trans athlete on my team or against my team anytime. I don't think it's a problem in the world. It's just another way to kind of attack trans people. Fair enough, that's her honest opinion, and she's entitled to it, just like Cunningham is entitled to hers. But notice what happened next to each of them. One got framed as brave and progressive. The other got quietly benched with reduced minutes and had her own supporters confronted by team ownership at a game in Seattle. Same league, same debate. If your league truly stands for inclusion, the standard needs to apply evenly to every opinion, not just the ones that are easier to defend in a press release. Right now, it looks like the WNBA rewards vague, safe language and punishes anyone specific enough to actually be quoted directly. That's not a stance on trans athletes. That's just risk management dressed up as a value statement.
I think for us, it's not really a discussion we really have in our locker room. I think it's for leagues and the governing bodies to work with their athletes to find solutions, but our focus is on basketball, and that's what we talk about and how we can get wins, and obviously we didn't do that tonight, so need to find an area to improve in that way.
Do you have any, reaction to the...
I just answered for you.
Even Caitlin Clark, who almost never wades into anything controversial, said publicly that she thinks leagues themselves should be the ones deciding who gets included in women's sports. Reasonable, careful, exactly what you'd expect from someone who's spent her whole career avoiding unnecessary noise. And the WNBA's response to that comment? Nothing. Total silence. The same silence it's given every single request for clarity since this thing started. It's worth sitting with why Clark's comment barely made a ripple compared to Cunningham's almost identical stance. Both of them, in their own words, said essentially the same thing. Somebody with actual authority needs to set a clear standard. So you've got players on one side saying trans women should be welcome, players on the other side saying the league needs a clear rule to protect biological fairness, and a front office that refuses to just answer the question either way. That silence is exactly the gap Cantor decided to walk straight into.
So what this forces the WNBA to do is put their money where their mouth is and draft Enes Kanter Freedom to a WNBA team, or change their policy. Or I guess be called out on their bigotry. Inevitably, people are going to say that Enes Kanter Freedom is making a mockery of women's sport, but that's not how I see this. The people who advocate for men and women's sports are making the mockery. Enes Kanter Freedom is making a mockery of the mockery. And I think that's the most effective way to highlight the hypocrisy and the insanity of the things that they're actually advocating for. Several coaches support it. Even several WNBA players support it. So, let's say you WNBA, this South Park episode has now become like the blueprint. I went off this route.
Because think about what he's actually arguing. He's not saying he genuinely believes he should suit up for a WNBA franchise next spring. He's saying if self-identification really is the entire standard, and if the league can't or won't define who is and isn't eligible in writing, then technically, by the league's own silence, nobody can tell him he doesn't qualify. It's a stunt, sure, but it's a stunt built entirely out of the WNBA's own refusal to give a straight answer.
Let me get this straight. Since when can NBA players play in the WNBA? Because former NBA player Enes Kanter officially declares himself as a WNBA prospect. Now, I'm not gonna lie. This man might be onto something, or he might be on something. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Either he has the worst case of CTE, or he just found some wiggle room in between them guidelines, because how the hell is an NBA player playing at WNBA? But all I know is that over...
There's also a financial angle nobody's talking about enough. Every time this story trends, it drives real traffic and real attention toward a league that spent years fighting for exactly that kind of mainstream visibility. Kanter's stunt has been shared by major outlets, debated on national morning shows, and dissected on nearly every sports podcast that covers either league. Whether the WNBA likes the reason behind the attention or not, more people are talking about its rulebook this week than at almost any point since the last collective bargaining fight. The other half called it mean-spirited and said it trivializes a serious conversation about real people's lives. Both things can be true at the same time, honestly. It can be a joke and still be making a completely legitimate point about a league that won't write down its own rules.
A message from WNBPA leadership to everyone who loves this game, to the 40,000. The WNBPA represents 200 plus individual people with different lived experiences, cultures, lifestyles, and opinions. We embrace justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the values that unite this union and allow it to protect women's sports while creating transformational change. Transformational change. Hate, abuse, and demonization of any person or group of people, including transgender people, only fuel fear, division, and harm. We will continue to have hard conversations, but we will not be used as political pawns. Support the players, support the fans. At games, notify security if you witness hateful, violent, or abusive behavior. Only report abusive posts and drown out the bots and bad actors. At home, tell your elected officials to strengthen Title.
The WNBA Players Association clearly felt the heat, because less than a day after Cantor's video went up, they put out a real, official statement responding to the entire situation. Here's what it said, word for word. To everyone who loves this game, the WNBPA represents 200-plus individual people with different lived experiences, cultures, lifestyles, and opinions. We embrace justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the values that unite this union and allow it to protect women's sports while creating transformational change. Hate, abuse, and demonization of any person or group of people, including transgender people. It talks about values, about hate and division, about not being political pawns. And then it moves straight into asking fans to report abusive posts online and contact their elected officials about Title IX. That's a statement about tone. It is not a statement about policy. And tone was never actually the problem here.
Now, putting word salad in written form, very impressive. To take word salad and turn it in and actually put it to paper, put pen to paper, put fingers to keyboard to the document. It takes some serious levels of skill. And I admire whoever wrote this. Shout out to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, you did a good job writing this. You did a very good job writing.
Compare that non-answer to how directly Gabby Williams spoke just days earlier. She didn't hide behind institutional language. She said flatly she'd welcome a trans athlete on her team or against her team anytime and moved on. Whatever you think of that position, at least it's an actual position, stated by an actual person willing to attach her name to it. The union's statement, by contrast, reads like it was written by a committee specifically trying to avoid saying anything that could be quoted back at them in a headline. And in a way, it already has been, because that vagueness is precisely what's fueling the mockery instead of quieting it down.
It looked like a hostage video. I have to give a lot of credit, by the way, to Outkick, who's been at these press conferences. When you saw those players leave, it's because Outkick was asking the tough questions. We appreciate them for their reporting. I'm not a scientific specialist either, but I can tell woman, man, and I just did it. I also like this point at the end where separate is not equal, trans lives matter. Okay, then to that rationale, then you guys should just play in the NBA, and we'll see how many of you make it. I mean, you know how stupid it is to say, like, you can't separate men and women. Your league literally exists because you separated men and women. That's the only reason the WNBA is a thing, and they are doing their damnedest to make sure it's not a league anymore, by the way. It's become a joke of a league, and not for the wonderful women that are playing in it, but for some of them that are serving as giant distractions. That's not Sophie, and that's not Caitlin. It's the rest of these morons who want to kill their golden goose, want to make everything about race, who are betting on their own games, by the way. That's a whole other controversy. And they can't tell the difference between a man and a woman. I mean, I digress.
That's exactly the hypocrisy people have been calling out for weeks now. And it's why this Cantor stunt landed the way it did. You cannot build your entire public brand around inclusion and self-identification. Let your own players publicly champion those exact values on camera, and then act shocked and offended when someone takes your stated principles literally and applies them to himself. Either the rule means what it says, or it doesn't. The league doesn't get to have it both ways just because the person testing it happens to be a former NBA player instead of the person they originally had in mind. And here's the part that should really worry the league office. Cantor isn't the only one paying attention anymore. When professional athletes from an entirely different sport start treating your eligibility rules as a loophole worth exploiting, you don't have a messaging problem anymore. You have a rules problem, and everyone can see it now.
Good Lord, nothing like promoting your own demise. What an idiot. Gabby Williams. Black trans lives matter. Watching the WNBA implode in real time. Priceless. Which is exactly where this is headed. It's not another way to attack trans people. It's another way to protect.
So where does that leave the actual athletes who play in this league every single night? Somewhere in the middle, mostly ignored, while the league office hides behind carefully worded statements, instead of doing the one thing that would actually fix this. Write the rule down. Define it in plain language. Say clearly who is and isn't eligible, and why, and let the players build their careers around an actual standard instead of a guessing game that changes depending on who's asking and how loud the backlash gets. Because right now, nobody, not the fans, not the players, not even the league's own union, can tell you with total confidence what the actual rule is. And when your own players' association has to publicly clarify that it will not be used as political pawns instead of just answering a basic eligibility question, you've already lost control of the narrative. A former NBA player in a mock draft video proved that in under 2 minutes, and the league still hasn't recovered from it.
I'm fucking disgusted. The way so many people are treating Anessa Freedom Cantor after finally living her truth, you should all be ashamed of yourself. She is brave, stunning, and courageous, and we all should root for her to succeed in this new stage of her life. So many people who advocate for people like her to suddenly turn their back only because she's new to the lifestyle, shame on all of you. Her past career as an NBA player shouldn't matter. She is reborn. Kathy Engelbert needs to put out a statement immediately and force a team to sign her. I'm literally...
National sports commentators picked up on that same gap almost immediately. Segments across multiple networks framed the story the same basic way. A legally clever joke exposing a genuinely unresolved policy question dressed up in a highlight reel-worthy soundbite. Some hosts leaned into the comedy of a former NBA big man declaring for a women's league. Others used it as a jumping-off point to ask a much more serious question on air. If the WNBA truly can't articulate its own eligibility rule after months of pressure, what exactly is stopping this from happening again, with someone far less interested in making a point and far more interested in exploiting the loophole for real? Until somebody in that office actually answers that question in plain English, stunts like Cantor's aren't going away. If anything, they're just getting started. That's the real headline buried under all the jokes and the outrage. A professional sports league that still cannot answer, in plain language, the one question everyone actually wants answered.